Relax and listen to the voice. Hello to everyone out there. We're back with another episode on legends and creatures from around the world. Thank you for joining us again. Please remember to subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can stay on top of every video we upload. Share this, watch it, enjoy it. Thank you all again for being here. And with that, here we go. A ghoul is an Arabic folkloric creature associated with graveyards and consuming human flesh. The oldest surviving literature that mentions ghouls is Arabian Nights. The term was first used in English literature in 1786 in William Beckford's Orientalist novel Vathek, which describes the ghoul of Arabian folklore. Originally in pre-Islamic times, the males were called kutrab and the females called gula. Ghoul is from the Arabic word ghoul, from gula, which means to seize. Mark Kramer and others believe the term to be etymologically related to galu, a Middle Eastern demon. In Sumerian and Akkadian, or Babylonian and Assyrian mythology, the Galas, also called Gallus, were great demons and devils that roamed the streets, hiding in dark corners or deserted places. According to Morris Jastraw's Religion of Babylonia and Assyria, the Galu lurked in remote or hidden places like graves, mountaintops, and in the shadows of ruins. The Galu would go out at night, enter into homes through holes and crevices, and begin to torture their victims. The Gulu were said to be so frighteningly hideous that they were associated with nightmares. They were also known to drink the blood and devour the flesh and bones of their victims. In ancient Arabic folklore, the ghoul, with a literal translation meaning demon, dwells in burial grounds and other uninhabited places. The ghoul is a fiendish type of jinn, believed to be sired by Iblis. A ghoul is also a desert-dwelling, shape-shifting, evil demon that can assume the guise of an animal, especially a hyena. It lures unwary people into the desert wastes or abandoned places to slay and devour them. The creature also preys on young children, drinks blood, steals coins, and eats the dead, then taking the form of the person they have most recently eaten. In the Arabic language, the female form is given as gule, and the plural is gilan. In colloquial Arabic, the term is sometimes used to describe a greedy or gluttonous individual. Ghouls who are well fed on human flesh are indistinguishable from normal humans. The longer that a ghoul goes without actually feeding, the less and less human it begins to look. If you were to see a ghoul in the later stages of starvation, you would see that it would be extremely thin and pale, with its veins clearly visible through its skin, and it would also have long, claw-like nails. It is said that ghouls have the ability to take on the abilities and appearances of any person whose body they have recently eaten. Some ancient stories claim that ghouls can also turn into jackals, hyenas, or other animals, but so far, the ghoul's ability to take on animal forms remains mostly unverified. Ghouls are also rumored to be slightly greater in strength than most humans. Ghouls must eat human flesh on a regular basis in order to survive. A ghoul who is denied his hunger for flesh for too long will begin to suffer the physical effects of starvation, even if eating other food sources. The ghoul will then suffer mental deterioration. As that condition grows worse, the ghoul loses any semblance of its former humanity. There are several theories regarding the origin of ghouls. The three most common are that ghouls are a type of demon the result of demon and human crossbreeding, or normal humans who suffer from an ancestral curse. The fact that ghouls are genetically indistinguishable from humans seems to suggest the latter, but the existence of shapeshifters who can mimic humans down to the cellular level means that it's impossible to rule out a demonic origin. Because ghouls are able to take on the form of any human whose flesh they have eaten, those who are careful to conceal their eating habits can operate in human society. Even if they are to be caught, ghouls are often initially mistaken for human cannibals, with their true nature only being revealed when they are deprived of human flesh. Some civil rights activists have even suggested that allowing an imprisoned ghoul to become a ravening beast due to hunger constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. However, the small number of cases, the mental deterioration of the affected prisoners, and the disturbing nature of the alternative have prevented any real legal exploration of the question as of this current date. In order to avoid starvation, a ghoul needs to consume an enormous amount of human flesh, roughly 10 to 15 pounds per day. Those who do not begin to suffer the effects of starvation, eventually becoming inhuman predators. While most ghoul children are raised on human flesh, they do not seem to suffer the effects of deprivation up until they reach puberty. Although ghouls reproduce normally, some ghoul families believe that it is necessary to breed with humans in order to prevent their bloodlines from becoming inbred to the point of weakness. Ghoul families who follow this tradition typically believe that offspring between a human and a ghoul will only be produced if the human has first been buried alive or imprisoned in a crypt for at least 24 hours prior to mating. It is not known whether or not there is any truth to this superstition, or if all children who result from such unions become ghouls. Human women impregnated by male ghouls are typically held captive until the child is born, and then typically the mothers are killed and eaten. Human men who mate with female ghouls have a considerably shorter expected lifespan. Ghouls have been reported throughout history in every part of the world, and several ghouls have allegedly been captured in recent history. In 2003, 2 survivors described their encounter with, and the self-defense slaying of, a family in which they believed to be ghouls in rural West Virginia. On April 11th of 2016, a strange sighting of a dark human-like creature was sighted around SMK Penkalon Chipa No. 2 boarding school grounds. This creature has come to be known as the Penkalon Chipa creature. The creature was claimed by locals to have been a jinn that started to appear after local students polluted and disturbed the forest grounds. It was cited by numerous students and school officials. The sighting of this creature resulted in a small and brief mass hysteria and the school's cancellation on the date of April 17th. Local officials mounted a police investigation and brought in Islamic scholars and witch doctors who were called in to carry out exorcisms. Throughout movies, television shows, and even anime and comics, ghouls are shown in various different ways and with various abilities. In the extremely popular anime Tokyo Ghoul and the sequel series Tokyo Ghoul Re, ghouls live among humans and are seen as carnivorous monsters that resemble humans in every way, except for an extreme craving for human flesh and a predatory organ weapon called a kagune, unique to each ghoul with special abilities. In the webcomic The Last Halloween, a character named Shirley is a Frankenstein monster-like ghoul, which is mistaken by the main character to be a zombie. Shirley is one of the main characters, along with a vampire, a doll, and a werepossum, a hybrid werewolf and possum creature. Shirley has the ability to regenerate lost body parts. According to Shirley, zombies are low-functioning and often dangerous to humans, whereas ghouls are just sad and harmless. Let's not forget hungry, Shirley. Let's not forget hungry. A Preta in Hinduism is defined as a wandering spirit of a dead person who is not at rest. In Buddhism, a Preta is defined as an unresting ghost tortured incessantly by hunger and thirst. The Preta is also known as a hungry ghost. It is the Sanskrit name for a type of supernatural being described in Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and Chinese folk religion as undergoing suffering greater than that of humans, particularly an extreme level of hunger and thirst. The Preta have their origins in Indian religions and have been adopted into East Asian religions via the spread of Buddhism. Preta is often translated into English as hungry ghost from the Chinese and East Asian adaptations. In early sources, such as the Petavatu, they are much more varied. The following descriptions apply mainly in this narrower context. The development of the concept of the Preta started with just thinking that it was the soul and ghost of a person once they died, but later the concept developed into a transient state between death and obtaining karmic reincarnation in accordance with the person's fate. In order to pass into the cycle of karmic reincarnation, the deceased's family must engage in a variety of rituals and offerings to guide the suffering spirit into its next life. If the family does not engage in these funerary rites, which last for up to 1 year, the soul could remain suffering as a Preta for the rest of eternity. Pretas are often believed to have been false, corrupted, compulsive, deceitful, jealous, or greedy people in a previous life. As a result of their karma, they are afflicted with an insatiable hunger for a particular substance or object. Traditionally, this substance or object is something repugnant or humiliating, such as cadavers or feces, though in more recent stories of the Preta, it can be anything, however bizarre. In addition to having insatiable hunger for an aversive item, Pretas are said to have disturbing visions. Pretas and human beings occupy the same physical space, and while humans looking at a river would see clear water, a Preta would see the same river flowing with an aversive substance, such as pus, or blood, or bile. Through the belief and influence of Hinduism and Buddhism in much of Asia, Preta figures appear prominently in the cultures of India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Tibet, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. The Sanskrit term Preta means departed, deceased, a dead person. This comes from Preta, literally translated to gone forth, departed. In classical Sanskrit, the term refers to the spirit of any dead person, but especially before the obsequial rites are performed, but also more narrowly to a ghost or evil being. The Sanskrit term was taken up in Buddhism to describe one of 6 possible states of rebirth. Pretas are invisible to the human eye, but some believe they can be discerned by humans in certain mental states. They are described as human-like, but with sunken, mummified skin, narrow limbs, enormously distended bellies, and long, thin necks. This appearance is a metaphor for their mental situation. They have enormous appetites, signified by their gigantic bellies, but they have a very limited ability to satisfy those appetites, which is symbolized by their long, slender necks. Pretas are often depicted in Japanese art, particularly of gakizoshi, as emaciated human-like creatures with bulging stomachs with dependable size and rather thin throats. They're frequently shown licking up spilled water in temples, accompanied by a demon, most specifically Oni, desperately begging the humans and scavenging things, or winding up in severe pain representing their personal agony. Otherwise, Pretas may be shown as balls of smoke or fire. Often, Pretas are usually depicted naked, while others wear fundoshi, or underwear. In Cambodia, a special female Preta is known as a grak, a malevolent spirit believed to be the spirit of a corrupt old woman named Ye Plang, who was in charge of preparing food for the royal family and for monks in temples near the royal palace during the reign of King Monivong between 1927 and 1941. Pretas are said to dwell in the wasted and deserted places of the earth, and they vary in situation according to their past karmas. Some of them can eat a little, but find it very difficult to find food or drink. Others can find food and drink, but find it very difficult to swallow. Others find that the food that they eat seems to burst into flames as they swallow it. Some others are said to see something edible or drinkable and desire to do so, but it withers or dries up right before their eyes, and as a result of this, they are always hungry. In addition to hunger, Pretas suffer from immoderate heat and cold. They find that even the moon scorches them in the summer, while the sun freezes them in the winter. The types of suffering are specified into two main types of Pretas, those that live collectively and those that travel through space. Of the former, there are three subtypes, the first being Pretas who suffer from external obscurations. These Pretas suffer constant hunger, thirst, or temperature insensitivity. The second type of Pretas are those who suffer from internal obscurations, who have small mouths and large stomachs. Often their mouths are so small that they cannot eat enough food to fill the large space in their stomachs, and thus they remain constantly hungry. The last of the three subtypes are Pretas that suffer from specific obscurations, like creatures who live on and eat their bodies. The other broad category of Pretas that travel through time and space are always scared and have a tendency to inflict pain on others. The suffering of the Pretas often resembles depictions of those who are allegedly dwelling in hell, and the two types of beings are easily confused. The simplest distinction between the two is that the beings in hell are confined to their subterranean world, while Pretas are free to move about. Pretas are generally seen as little more than nuisances to mortals unless their longing is directed towards something vital, such as blood or flesh. However, in some traditions, Pretas try to prevent others from satisfying their own desires by means of magic, illusions, or disguises. They can also turn invisible or change their faces to frighten mortals. Generally, however, Pretas are seen as beings to be pitied. Thus, in some Buddhist monasteries, monks leave offerings of food, beverages, incenses, lights, fruits, or flowers to the Pretas before meals. In addition, there are many festivals around Asia that commemorate the importance of hungry ghosts or Pretas, and such festivals exist in Tibetan Buddhist tradition as well as Chinese Taoist tradition. Countries such as China, Cambodia, Tibet, Thailand, Singapore, Japan, and Malaysia engage in hungry ghost festivals, and in China, this is usually on the 15th day of the 7th lunar moon, according to their calendar. Many rituals involve burning symbolized material possessions, such as joss paper, in the form of money, clothes, gadgets, transportation, estates, accommodation, luxuries, etc., etc., thus linking the concept of the Preta with the deceased's materialism in their lifetime. Though many Pretas, or hungry ghosts, cling to their material possessions during their human lifetime, some other ghosts that are represented in the festivals long for those that they loved during their human lifetime. During the festivals, people give offerings to the spirits and hope for blessings from their ancestors in return. Thus, the Hungry Ghost festivals commemorating the Pretas are a natural part of some Asian cultures and are not limited to only Hindu or Buddhist belief systems. The Banshee is a female spirit-like creature in Irish mythology, usually seen as an omen of death and the messenger from the underworld. Most usually called the Banshee, this creature will sometimes be named as the Banshee or Beansea. In legend, a Banshee is a fairy woman who begins to wail if someone is about to die. In Scottish Gaelic mythology, she is known as the Bean Sith or Bean Nay and is seen washing the blood-stained clothes or armor of those who are about to die. Alleged sightings of banshees have been reported as recently as 1948. Similar beings are also found in Welsh and Norse folklore and that of the United States. A banshee is a creature from Irish folklore whose scream was an omen of death. Her thin scream is referred to as a caoin, which translates to keening. It is said that a banshee's cry predicts the death of a member of one of Ireland's 5 major families: the O'Grady's, the O'Neills, the O'Briens, the O'Connors, or the Kavanaghs. Over time, as families blended, it was said that most Irish families had their own banshee. It is also said that the banshees followed their families as they emigrated from Ireland to other places across the globe, though some stayed behind to grieve at the original family estates. Various versions of the banshee have been described, from a woman with long red hair and very pale skin to an older woman with stringy gray hair, rotten teeth, and fiery red eyes. She is often depicted with a comb in her hair, and this has led to an Irish superstition that finding a comb on the ground is considered bad luck. It is believed that a single banshee can take on any of these forms and shift between them, much like the goddesses of Celtic folklore. Other forms of the banshee include the Bean Nye and the Washerwoman, both more attributed to Scotland than to Ireland. The Bean Nye is said to be the ghost of a woman who died during childbirth and would be seen wearing the clothes of the person about to die, while the washerwoman is dressed like a countrywoman and is cleaning bloody rags on a river shore. It is unknown precisely when the stories of banshees first were told, but they can be traced back as far as the early 8th century. It is believed that they were based on an old Irish tradition where women would sing a lament to signify one's passing. This, too, was referred to as keening. As many keeners accepted alcohol as payment, which the church frowned upon very much, many have speculated it was these keeners who were punished in the eyes of the Lord and were forced to become banshees. Another factor that likely contributed to the superstitious legend is the cry of the barn owl. In ancient battles, owls would screech and take flight if they noticed an army approaching, which could possibly forewarn the defending army. There have been several reported banshee sightings, but it is said that if a banshee becomes aware of a human's presence watching her, she will disappear into a cloud of mist. When she does, it is accompanied by a fluttering sound like a bird flapping its wings. The Irish do not believe that the banshee causes death, but merely warns of it. Although during Middle Ages it was said that the banshee would also protect the souls of those of good heart and deed after they had passed on. The Bean Sere is also said to have a sister, the Leonhan Sere, who would win the love of mortal men and use it to destroy them. Many see banshees as entering folklore, while others genuinely believe in their existence. Had evidence of banshees consistently coincided with death by long-term illness or other easily foreseeable causes, there likely wouldn't be as much support. However, there have been reports of drowning and other sudden deaths of perfectly healthy individuals in the weeks following what was thought to be the sound of a banshee's cry. The most famous example of this is King James I of Scotland, who was murdered soon after he reported having been approached by a strange Irish seer. The Nuckelavee, or Nuckelavee, supposedly meaning devil of the sea, is a creature from Orcadian folklore. The name is a latter corruption of the Orcadian name Nuckelavee, which in turn seems to be a variant of the Nuck or Nuggle, and is thus related to the Icelandic Nikar. The Nuckelavee is a legendary nightmare creature with cultural origins coming from the Orkney Islands of Scotland. The Nuckelavee is the most malevolent of the demons in and around the Scottish Islands, without any redeeming characteristics. In summer months, it was restrained in the depths of the ocean by the deity known as the Mither of the Sea. A unique and solitary creature, possessing extensive evil powers, it can influence events throughout the islands. The Nuckelavee's breath was allegedly toxic, and it could wither the crops, cause a drought, and cause disease and plague in both livestock and humans. The Nuckelavee is said to hate the smell of burning seaweed to create kelp. This smell upsets the Nuckelavee to such an extent that it can allegedly send it into a fit of rage, and once enraged, the Nuckelavee would kill fields of cattle, and the only person that could stop him is the Mither of the Sea. In discussing the appearances of the Nuckelavees, there are a few different variations. One is that the Nuckelavees are strongly built and stand nearly 6 feet tall at their horse head and about 9 feet tall at their humanoid head, with a weight of nearly 2,000 pounds. The Nuckelavee resembles a horse whose legs are part fin like a fish, who have a single giant eye which burns with a red flame. A human with a large head is merged along the back of the horse body like some sort of strange centaur. The most gruesome detail of the Nuckelavee's appearance is the fact that he has no skin. Black blood courses through yellow veins, and the pale sinews and powerful muscles are visible as a pulsating mass. Some reports claim that the Nuckelavee is simply a very large head on 2 small arms, with all of the other characteristics mentioned above. The Nuckelavee allegedly has an aversion to fresh water, and anyone who is being chased by him need only to cross a stream to make their escape. It is also said that the Nuckelavee will not come ashore if it's raining outside. The Nuckelavee is described as a creature of abject terror and spoken of with bated breath until relatively recent times. Although many folklore creatures have a dualistic nature, the Nuckelavee was a creature that represented sheer evil. The sole purpose was to plague the islanders, which was a task from which he rarely rested. Despite the fact that the Nuckelavee's home was considered to be the sea, the Nuckelavee was known to wander freely on the land. It was also during these landward excursions that he was most often encountered by mortals, and alleged to have been riding a steed equally as monstrous as himself. With surviving accounts varying, and some storytellers merging the two monsters so that the rider and horse become one, a vile hybrid of man and beast that they swore was the Nuckelavee's true shape. From the few recorded descriptions of the Nuckelavee, we've learned that his head was similar of that to a man, only 10 times larger, and that he had an incredibly wide mouth that jutted out like a pig's snout, and as discussed earlier, a single red eye that burned with a red flame. Another description was that the creature is completely hairless and his body also skinless, with its entire surface appearing like raw and living flesh. This description also describes that the Nuckelavee has long, ape-like arms that hang down to the ground, and from his gaping mouth spewing a foul black stench. The Nuckelavee was often blamed for numerous disasters that were known to afflict the hard-working folk of Orkney. If crops were blighted by sea gust or mildew, if livestock fell over high rocks that skirts the shores, or if an epidemic raged among men or among the lower animals, Nuckelavee was the cause of all. His breath was venom, falling like blight on vegetable, and with deadly disease on animal life. Once the Nuckelavee was exposed to the smell of the pungent smoke from burning seaweed to make kelp, his violent diabolical rage would become vented, and his wrath would be released by smiting all of the horses on the island of Stronsay, the island where kelp was first burned in Orkney with a deadly disease known as mortashine. Once propagated, mortashine would soon spread throughout the islands where kelp was burned, and at this, Nuckelavee's revenge was terrible and complete. The Choctaw tribes of the United States have stories about shadow beings. Nalusha Chito, also known as Impashilip, was the soul leader, who was a great black being. If individuals allowed evil thoughts or depression to enter into their minds, Impashilip would creep inside them and eat their souls. Many people of the Choctaw Nation will not say his name in fear of summoning the spirit. The Choctaw tribe have many tales regarding different types of shadow beings. In all cases, these beings are regarded as evil and trickster type of creatures. One of the nastiest is the Nalusha Chito. The Choctaw believe that these beings were created by the Great Spirit before the Choctaws, but that these creatures became self-absorbed and cruel. As a result of this, they were made into shadow and banished into another realm. Now angered at being replaced as they saw it, the Nalusha Chito came into the dreams of people, in particular those with bad intentions, with the intent on taking them over and to make the humans commit bad actions. Although the Nalusha Chito could allegedly be removed by a medicine man, it was a very hard ritual to do. The Nalusha Chito are said to have pointed ears and slither just as a snake, and as previously discussed, even uttering their name is a taboo. This malevolent being takes the form of a colossal, pitch-black humanoid figure, shrouded in shadows that seems to consume all of the light around it. As it is considered the great eater of souls, Nalusha Chito preys upon those whose minds are tainted by dark or malevolent thoughts. Nalusha Chito is said to have the power to enter the minds of individuals who may be harboring dark or evil ideas, and the ability to then devour their very souls. It is as if this formidable spirit possesses the ability to exploit the chinks in the armor of the human mind, feasting on their innermost fears, doubts, and malevolent emotions. This creature is so vicious and relentless, its pursuit extends to those suffering from the weight of depression, as their vulnerable state makes them susceptible to its sinister influence. The Nalusha Chito towers over the average human. The ominous creature stands at an imposing height, reaching what is said to be close to 10 feet tall. The physique of the Nalusha Chito is draped in an inky black, shadowy cloak, which is reminiscent of a human silhouette, but it's distorted and elongated in eerie proportions. The Nalusha Chito's limbs are elongated, and they're adorned with sinewy, spindly fingers that end in wickedly sharp claws, which are said to be sharp and ready to puncture and seize its unfortunate victims. The legs of the Nalusha Chito are very long and powerful, allowing it to move with unsettling grace and speed. Despite what seems to be a solid, stout form, the Nalusha Chito's figure ripples and shifts with a fluid-like quality, as discussed earlier, moving similarly to a snake, but also betraying its ethereal nature and connecting it to the shadows. The face of the Nalusha Chito is the most unsettling feature, which is shrouded in perpetual darkness. This being is said to have deep-set, dark, wicked eyes that glow with an unnatural crimson hue, like smoldering embers of a fire that has been long since extinguished. The mouth of this beast is a gaping void of shadows that seems to swallow all hope and light, leaving an oppressive sense of emptiness in its wake. The creature's visage is framed by tendrils of darkness, obscuring its actual form and only hinting at the nightmarish creature that lurks underneath. The Nalusha Chito is known to be a very patient, stalking predator, lurking in the dark and waiting to strike when its victims are at their lowest. A redcap, also known as a powrie or dunter, is a type of malevolent, murderous dwarf, goblin, elf, or fairy who is found in the border folklore between England and Scotland. The redcaps are said to have inhabited ruined castles found all along the borders between England and Scotland. Redcaps are said to have murdered travelers who stray into their homes, and they dye their hats with the victim's blood, which is where they get their name. As legend has it, redcaps must kill regularly, for if the blood that stains their hats dries out, they will die. Redcaps are described as being very fast in spite of the heavy iron pikes they wield and the iron-shod boots that they wear. The possibility of outrunning a redcap is supposedly an impossible task. In imagery, redcaps are depicted as sturdy old men with red eyes, taloned hands with sharp, pointed fingers, and large, jagged teeth, wearing a cap that has been dyed red and bearing a pike staff in their left hands. One tale of a redcap in Perthshire describes him as more benign, living in a room in Grantully Castle, He is known to bestow good fortune on those who see or hear him. The kabouter, or the redcaps of Dutch folklore, are very different in nature and are more akin to brownie-type creatures and known to be mischievous tricksters. According to the local legends, Robin Redcap, along with his master, were responsible for all manner of depravity and devil-worshipping in the past, and became so dangerous that the locals had to stage a rebellion of sorts against William de Solis and boil the madman alive to stop his reign of terror. As for Robin Redcap himself, the demon was said to have vanished shortly after the death of his master, though it is never truly known if such a being could ever truly be considered dead. Perhaps he is still waiting for a chance to return. In some versions of this tale, Robin can be seen infrequently guarding a hidden treasure buried deep under the castle, which he amassed during his reign of terror. Robin Redcap is likely related to other roaming spirits in English mythology, and may as well be an alter ego of said beings. Indeed, when his master died, it is possible that Robin Redcap simply took on another form and another name, as was common for malicious fairy folk of this period. Robin Redcap's infamy is sufficient enough that in some similar versions of the legend, he is not just a goblin, but an alter ego of the devil himself. One item of interest is that despite their very brutal nature, redcaps are still known to travel in groups and somehow have some sort of a sense of family among other redcaps. This can be noted in some tales of redcaps where the males will go out quote-unquote hunting and commit their acts of debauchery, while the female redcaps stay at home taking care of their offspring. The Dover Demon is a small humanoid reported from Dover, Massachusetts, in the United States of America. The Dover Demon was the subject of an intensive scare during the late 1970s when multiple witnesses came forward with their sightings. The Dover Demon is described as looking sort of like the gray variety of aliens, except for that it has rosy tan-colored skin instead. This creature has a large head on a small, skinny, stick-like body. It is described as being bipedal, but it often travels on all fours or switches back and forth between the two modes of transport. The Dover Demon has eyes that glow, usually being described as orange or sometimes green. It does not seem to wear any clothing, and unlike the gray aliens, the Dover Demon does not seem to be associated with any UFO phenomenon, rather just simply wandering around on its own. Cryptozoologists seldom show interest in the Dover Demon, and mainstream cryptozoologists are rarely willing to seriously investigate humanoids other than hairy humanoids. It seems that sightings of the Dover Demon only happen during a short period of time, with most claiming that the sightings have now ceased. So therefore, to many cryptozoologists, the Dover Demon does not seem to be a very pressing matter. In late 1970, as reported at roughly 10:32 p.m. on April 21st, three 17-year-olds, Bill Bartlett, Mike Mazoka, and Andy Brody, were driving north on Farm Street. Bartlett, who was behind the wheel of the Volkswagen van, swears that he spotted something creeping along a low wall of loose stones on the left side of the road. At first, Bill Bartlett thought that he was looking at a dog or a cat, until his headlights shone upon it, and he realized it was nothing that he had ever seen before. As the headlights passed over this creature, the figure slowly turned its head and stared directly at the vehicle and into the headlights, with its two large, round, glassy, lidless eyes shining brightly, like giant orange marbles. The creature's watermelon-shaped head, resting on the top of its thin neck, seemed to be the size of its entire body. According to Bartlett, beside its oversized head, the creature was thin, with long spindly arms and legs, and extremely large hands and feet. The skin on this creature appeared to be hairless and peach-colored, similar to that of a Caucasian human, but also appeared to have a very rough texture, like the texture of wet sandpaper, as Bartlett described it. According to Bartlett's estimation, the creature probably stood about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, and was shaped like a baby's body, but with long arms and legs. Unfortunately, neither of Bartlett's companions were able to see the creature, and the sighting only lasted for a few seconds. Before Bartlett could even think to point out the creature, they continued driving and left the scene. At this point, Bartlett began to realize that he'd seen something he couldn't understand, and he began to be affected by this. Bartlett then allegedly dropped his friends off and went to his home on Walpole Street. Upon entering the door, Bartlett saw his father, and his father noticed that he was visibly upset. After asking his son what was wrong, Bartlett related the story, as well as making sketches of what he thought he had seen. Around midnight, within a very similar time frame, 15-year-old John Baxter left his girlfriend, Kathy Cronin's house at the south end of Miller's High Road. Baxter began walking up the street and headed on his way home. Roughly 1/2 hour later, after Bartlett had walked a little over a mile, he observed what he thought was someone who was approaching him. Because the figure he saw was short in stature, Baxter assumed it was an acquaintance of his, a man named M.G. Bouchard, who lived on the same street. John Baxter called out to who he thought was Bouchard, and received no response. Baxter and this unknown figure continued to approach each other until finally the latter stopped. Baxter then stopped as well, and feeling uneasy, he barked out loudly, "Who is that?" At this point, Baxter recalls that the sky was dark and overcast, and he could only see a shadowy form. In an attempt to get a better look, Baxter took another step forward, and within an instant of him doing so, the figure ahead of him scurried off to the left, and began running down a shallow, wooded gully and up the opposite bank. As the figure was running, Baxter realized he could hear its footsteps on the dry leaves. He began to follow the figure down the slope, and then he stopped and looked across the gully. It was then that he saw the creature, standing in the silhouette about 30 feet away. He realized that his feet seemed to grip around the top of a rock several feet from a tree, as if they were molded to that rock. Baxter realized that the creature's body seemed to remind him of that of a monkey, except for what he described as a dark, figure 8 shaped head. Baxter claims that the creature's eyes, 2 lighter spots in the middle of its head, were looking directly at him. Baxter stood there for a few minutes and then began to feel extremely uneasy. Upon succumbing to these feelings, Baxter realized that he had never seen such a creature before, and fearing for what the creature might do next, he began to back carefully up the slope, with his heart pounding away in his chest all the while. Once Baxter made it back to the roadside, he began to walk very fast and potentially even run to the intersection at Farm Street. It was then that he walked in front of a car, was driven by a couple, flagged them down, and requested that they pick him up and drive him home. Skeptics usually claim that the Dover Demon was simply a lost baby moose, glimpsed under unnatural, unusual lighting conditions that made the baby moose seem like a bizarre humanoid that sometimes went on four legs. People who don't believe that explanation point out that all of the sightings happened during the wrong time of year for a moose that small to exist. And they also point out that Massachusetts is very far from normal moose habitat. Even if such an orphan moose had been wandering around so close to populated areas, it seems as if it would have been easily captured. If the baby moose explanation appeals to you, then you could get around the worst objection by substituting a creature that does actually exist in the area and can be born any time of the year, which would be a baby calf. An orange-furred orphan calf would be a more likely candidate for such a proposal than a baby moose. Other suggested explanations include a wild monkey, a dog that no one could get a great look at, potentially an alien, some kind of wild animal mutation, or simply a hoax. Another explanation was that this monster could have been an escaped pet gibbon. These were illegal to own, but some species of gibbon even have orange babies, and white-cheeked gibbons have an orange color in females. Indrid Cold, commonly known as the Smiling Man, is an allegedly humanoid entity. The nickname comes from the being's tendency to smile at almost everyone that encountered him. It is said that he still visits West Virginia to this very day. The Smiling Man, or the Grinning Man, is reported to be human-like in appearance, though he is commonly associated with UFO activity and is sometimes believed to be an alien. It is also believed to be possible that he is connected with the Men in Black. In the first ever reported sighting, he was described as being over 6 feet tall and wearing a reflective green suit with a black belt. He had a dark complexion and small, beady eyes that were set very far apart. He was described as not having any nose, ears, or hair. In his second known encounter, his suit was said to be blue instead of green, but still retained its strange reflective properties. Other than that, he was described as looking perfectly natural, with slicked back hair, a coat with the top 2 buttons unbuttoned, and having pants lighter than the coat, but still of the same reflective material. He was also described as being quite tan, though not dark-skinned, and looking basically the same as any normal human being. According to reports made by Woodrow Derenberger, Indrid Cold came from a planet named Landulos in the Ganymedes galaxy, and there were 2 other grinning men by the names of Dino Hassan and Carl Ardo. The first sighting of Indrid Cold occurred on October 16th of 1966, when 2 boys, Martin Mouse Munov and James Jimmy Yanchitis of New Jersey, were walking on 4th Street when they saw a surreal figure standing near a fence. As they walked closer, they noticed that the figure was a tall, bald man wearing a metal green suit who was staring right at them with a huge grin. According to the boys, this strange man began to chase them until they finally got away from him. UFO sightings were also reported in the area around that time. Martin was quoted as saying, "Jimmy nudged me and said, 'Hey, who's that guy standing behind you?' I looked around, and there he was, behind that fence, just standing there. He pivoted around and he looked right at us, and then he grinned that big old grin of his." Initially, the boys simply reported the sighting, and it was only later that they recalled the more frightening details of their encounter. The boys would recall that the man in the green suit was unusually tall and had what they described as unnatural facial features, such as the lack of ears and a nose. Even though most sources mention the New Jersey sighting when referencing Indrid Cold, it's possible that Indrid Cold and the Grinning Man could be completely different entities. On November 2nd, 1966, in Parkersburg, West Virginia, roughly around the same area and same time as the Mothman came about, Woodrow Derenberger was driving his way home on Interstate 77 until he heard a loud crash. All of a sudden, an unidentifiable vehicle appeared to land in front of his truck. Woodrow described it as an old-fashioned kerosene lamp chimney, flaring at both ends, narrowing down to a small neck, and then enlarging in a great bulge in the center. According to Woodrow, this grinning man came out of the vehicle with a dark tan, and he walked up to him and telepathically said his name was Indrid Cold, and let him know that he meant him no harm. Indrid Cold went on to say that he just wanted to know more about the human race, and that he would visit Derenberger again. After the encounter, Derenberger stated that Cold revealed he was from the planet Lanulos in the galaxy Ganymedes. The third sighting occurred during the same period in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. The Lilly family had been reporting poltergeist activity in their home, including the phenomena of seeing diamond-shaped lights. The Lilly's daughter, Linda, was sleeping one night and awoke to see a man standing over her. Linda states, "It was a man, a big man, very broad. I couldn't see his face very well, but I could see that he was grinning at me. He walked around the bed and stood right over me. I screamed again and again, and I hid under the covers, and when I looked up again, he was gone." It is commonly believed that Indrid may be an alien entity, and this is possibly supported by its close connection with UFO activity and with Derenberger's sighting. It is also said by Derenberger that the Grinning Man is, in fact, a species of alien with multiple grinning men. However, this is unlikely unless the aliens are shapeshifters, because it would be almost impossible for a race to take the exact same evolutionary path as us. However, the third sighting by the Lilly family suggests instead that it may be a ghost or spirit of some kind, which was potentially connected with poltergeist activity happening in the residence. It may potentially be a prank that went too far, or a man with some sort of mental illness. Some people believe that Indrid Cold is a normal human man, or a hoax based off the popularity and fear of the Mothman, who had been first sighted around the same time. Lastly, there are some that believe that Indrid Cold, or the Grinning Man, was actually a character by the name of Valiant Thor. Valiant Thor is a name associated with a fascinating story that has captivated the imagination of many people for decades. According to the stories, Valiant Thor is said to be an extraterrestrial being who came to the Earth in the 1950s to deliver a message of peace and hope to humanity. According to the story, Valiant Thor arrived on Earth in 1957 along with two other beings. Valiant Thor and these two other beings allegedly landed in Alexandria, Virginia, and were met by a police officer who took them directly to the Pentagon. Valiant Thor claimed to be from the planet Venus and said that he was part of a delegation that had come to establish contact with Earth. Though Valiant Thor was said to be from the planet Venus, scientists have debunked this claim. The mission that Valiant Thor allegedly was sent on was to offer his help in solving some of Earth's pressing problems, such as nuclear weapons, poverty, and climate change. His message was one of peace, love, and unity, urging humanity to work together and overcome their differences. It is said that once at the Pentagon, Valiant Thor interacted with top-ranking officials and scientists, including President Eisenhower and then Vice President Nixon. Some say that Valiant Thor shared advanced technology with the U.S. government, including advancements in energy production, transportation, and medicine. There are skeptics who doubt the existence of Valiant Thor, considering the story too fantastical and lacking any solid concrete evidence. However, witness testimonies, including those from high-ranking government officials, and physical evidence, such as photographs and audio recordings, seem to lend credence and credibility to the story. Tanya Derenberger, daughter of Woodrow Derenberger, authored a book titled Beyond Lanulos, which was about her father's encounter and her family's past and alleged continuing interactions with Indrid Cold, potentially the Smiling Man, and as mentioned in her book, the entity known as Indrid Cold, who might also be known as Valiant Thor. Well, alright. There's episode 2 of Legends and Creatures from Around the World in the books. We do hope that you're enjoying this. We hope this sparks some interest for you and maybe you begin to check out some books, stories, internet clips, anything like that, just to see if you can find these creatures or learn more about them. Stay safe out there. The world is a wild, weird, and crazy place. We'd hate for you to run into some kind of creature that you can't explain. Stay safe. Stay inside. Press play on another story. Hopefully, you'll enjoy yourself and none of these creatures can get to you. Thank you all once again for listening. We hope that you have sweet dreams.